the reason that it has changed is because the world that it is referencing has changed.
Yeah.
It's not just because times have changed and like we don't write scripts this way anymore. Like, yes, it's that. But it's primarily because the job of science fiction is to comment on the real world. And if the base reality, right? We're not talking about simulation theory here, but I'm just using that word. If reality has changed, then the reality being commented on by science fiction has changed.
100%.
And that, just like if your show is narratively cohesive in that way, you're doing science fiction correctly. Welcome to Can't Let It Go, the show about the things stuck in our heads. My name is Matt, and I use he, him pronouns.
Hey, I'm AC. I use they, them pronouns.
And today, I don't know if we told you what we were going to do last time, but if we did say we were going to do Reliant K, surprise, we are not. We're going to do Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because you know why? It's been stuck in my head.
Well, and also because I will say, coincidentally, Matt texted me and was like, hey, what if we did a Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode? And I said, Matt, are we cosmically linked? Because I'm literally watching it right now as I'm reading
I think what I texted you was, are you much of a Star Trek person? And they said, I'm literally watching Strange New Worlds right now.
I'm literally watching it right fucking now.
And I was thinking, I love this show. We should talk about this on the show. But before we get to any of that, I'll just lay it out here. We've got some business, and then we have a couple nugget-ish things we want to talk about today. So this may be a bit longer of an episode.
Business in the front, party in the back.
Exactly. You've had that one locked and loaded.
Yeah.
So business, we've decided that we're going to call this episode that you're listening to right now the end of a season.
Whoa.
And we're going to take a little break. We will be back October, November-ish. We already have plans for a really awesome first episode. And literally right before we recorded, we started making plans for a really great second episode for season 2.
We're excited.
Definitely a break and not like anything to be scared of if you enjoy the show.
Yeah.
We just want to be conscious, I think, ahead of time that like doing something this regularly is draining, right?
Yeah.
And like it's super fun and we're having a good time, but also just want to like, I don't know, make this not feel like work.
Yeah, we're in it for the long haul. We're having fun. We also like want to take advantage of, this is the first like project that Matt and I have gotten to take on together. I guess maybe some of our projects in college, like we did stuff together, but this is our first project together in a long time. And I think like, I don't know, Matt and I, you might be surprised, listener, really like to do like postmortems on things and like figure out what's working and what we want to change. Yeah. So, we want to come back to you new and refreshed in the fall with a whole new slate of things we can't stop thinking about. I promise that between now and then we won't just stop thinking. That certainly won't be the case.
Correct.
We'll just maybe come back with a much longer list of things, a little bit more planned out than we went into this.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about that exact thing right now and just like creative inspiration. I've heard the phrases creative input versus creative output, right? And like I actually still feel really inspired for this show in particular. Yeah. But I don't know, I've seen our list start to dwindle and like the ideas come a little slower, and I'm excited to have a couple months where we can just like experience things and then immediately we'll have like a bunch of ideas.
100%.
Formalize things like social media plans, formalize things like, what segments are we living on the show, that kind of stuff.
Hey, maybe I'll finally get a website, Matt. And then when you ask me where people can find me on the internet, it will be a website.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're gonna take a couple months off. We will be back. I will say I can't really nail it down right now, but it's gonna be October, November-ish, probably early November. Yeah. We're kind of lining something up with a release date, so we'll figure that out. While we are taking a little bit of a break, I want to use this time personally to basically give myself some structure on the YouTube stuff that I make. So I have talked on this show several times about the fact that I make YouTube videos about games and technology. And I don't know, AC, we're both got different neurodivergencies. Yeah. And one way that mine takes shape is like a paralysis in getting things done. Mm-hmm. It's pretty classic for
executive
ADHD people.
Executive function in this economy.
I know, right? I don't have any. But something that helps me is putting structure on things and being responsible to people. And so I wanted to say to people that listen to this show that basically, as a replacement in my sort of like work, but also a replacement if you want to do something on days when this would normally release. In the meantime, I'm going to have a YouTube video out every 2 weeks at the very least. So I will be trying to do those on Tuesday mornings like we do with the podcast. I'm not going to hold myself to what kind of video that might be. It may be a short.
It could be a video about like what a really great game is.
Yeah.
And it could be very similar to this podcast where Matt is convincing you why you should play a video game.
Yeah, I've got a small like short series that I'm working on right now called Blank is a Good Game, because I wanted to deliver something that was the simplest message as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a fun series that I'm working on, trying to figure out how video essays work in a short form video thing. But I'm not going to do all shorts. But cool. Yeah, one video every 2 weeks. You can go check that out. That's at matthorton.live like everything else is. In the meantime, and then when we get back on schedule, I'm going to try and keep that up and basically do it on off weeks.
Yeah. Heck yeah. You should watch Matt on YouTube. I promise the videos are good. I know I'm biased.
Of course, we always have a nugget, and I feel bad immediately springing this on AC because they literally just walked out of this movie.
I did.
But I want to talk about Oppenheimer. And AC, you are fresh. Like, I saw it 2 nights ago. So
I walked out of the movie theater 1 hour and 15 minutes ago.
Yes. I mean, where are you with it? It's so much movie.
This feels very interesting because I am still so fresh. My immediate first thought was, I don't think I liked that. And like, that's also, you gotta give it the context of like, I don't think I liked that. And also it's still it was a good film.
Yes.
I have some questions about it, and I have some like Christopher Nolan specific like thoughts about it, because I certainly like, the thing is like, it's a movie. I don't know that I really liked it, or I'll rush to see it again. But also as a Christopher Nolan a Christopher Nolan film, and I like Christopher Nolan's movies. So
I think I am with you on almost all of that. I would not use the words I didn't like it. I just think that I think technically it is his best film.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I don't mean that like, oh, technically it's like his best film, like overall. I mean that like from the what it takes to make a movie, like the mechanics of making a movie, I think it is his best film. I have a lot of problems with it. Like it, like I mean, this is like not a new opinion at all, but like it is trying to do a lot to apologize for itself, but also Oppenheimer. I mean, literally the last third of the movie is a straight up just like parade of apologies. Yeah. And I do think it takes an overall nuanced take about a person, right? But almost its existence. We've talked a lot about like the existence of like nuanced tellings of certain characters, like actually introduce too much complication sometimes, and like are maybe worse for the world than just kind of like leaving some maybe slightly wrong opinions in the other direction, right? Yeah. Just at bay. And I mean, the answer is that Christopher Nolan gets obsessed with things just like you and I do, and decides he's going to make a movie about something. But like, I kind of wonder, like, what was the point?
Sure. Yeah. I think I really agree with that. I did not leave that movie feeling like satisfied that the intention was in the same way that in Inception. Like, when I walked out of the theater in Inception, I understood that the intention was to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. And like, maybe this is just like I'm clearly one of the kinds of communists that this movie has a lot to say about, right? Like, I'm not a communist, but that's because I'm a socialist, and that's like a different thing, right? But like I didn't walk away from it being like, wow, I've never considered that about J. Robert Oppenheimer, or wow, I've never considered that about the series of events. I do think that like one of the things that's hardest for me about this film that I was able to immediately identify is that I wish that it was more in one category or the other between a narrative retelling of this man's life and an art film about this man's life.
I agree.
And like, I think it could have been a really fucking good art film. And it's the first time I've watched a Christopher Nolan movie that I felt like it almost lacked perspective. And like, I don't know that that's the right way to put it quite, like, because I haven't had a ton of time to marinate on it.
Right.
But what I walked away from it feeling was that it just wasn't, and not that a movie has to be satisfying, but that it didn't satisfy my understanding. Like, why, other than the way that Christopher Nolan likes to tell stories, why a disjointed timeline, right? Where in other Christopher Nolan films, the disjointed timeline slides into place and gives you a sense of awe and reconstruction. And there are certainly moments where the, like, without giving too many spoilers, right? Like, the visual elements of the film and the storytelling are trying to tell you something about the sound design, right? Like how characters' minds are destabilized, right? How Oppenheimer's mind is destabilized by his own thoughts, by his own perspective, by his own understanding of what he has wrought. And then it just feels like, I don't know, the rest of it is this like funny, like not funny, but like this little vignette of, have you ever considered you're not the main character? And then it's, I don't know.
Yeah, and the political thriller aspect of it too, it's trying to do a lot. I agree with you. It could have been an incredible little biography, or it could have been an amazing art film, right?
Yeah.
And the way that I say those words is that is a movie that should have been 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, you could have done the political thriller with
Robert Downey Jr.
Thank you. I can't believe I forgot Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. should win an Oscar for this movie.
Robert Downey Jr. is incredible in this movie, and I think if you did the art film version of this movie, he doesn't belong in it.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Like, all of the stuff where, like, Oppenheimer's in his own head, and the sound design is telling you what his emotions are, right? I'm being really, you know, sort of cagey for people that haven't seen the movie.
I mean,
but
it's history.
Yeah.
There's not spoilers
well,
here,
yeah, but the thing I'm trying not to spoil
watching,
is
right?
is sort of the techniques that Nolan uses. That stuff is really interesting to me, and like, maybe Robert Downey Jr. in that movie would be like a bit part, right? He would be there for 10 minutes and gone. But you could do the political thriller as well, the trial that he essentially gets put on. And that would also be a good movie, but doing them the same time, almost, you said this thing where like Nolan likes to do these disjointed timelines, and I think it kind of exists because he likes that. Like, he read that book and then was like, oh, this is interesting, I could do a time thing with this. Yeah. And like, I don't know that it was necessary.
And I understand that it's like, okay, it's the perspective of each of them in these different moments reflecting on the past, right? Like, I understand the framing of it. I think I understand anyway. And I don't think it was as successful as some of his other time manipulation stories. And like, I think that the other thing is, like, we know from the Batman movies that Christopher Nolan, or even The Prestige, Christopher Nolan knows how to tell a a straightforward timeline story, right, where there is some distraction happening, right? I don't know. I also have other bigger feelings, but I'm going to let you get an opportunity here. Oh. Are there other things you really want to say?
Well, I was going to say that The Prestige, you very well know, is my favorite movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a great fucking movie. And it, like, was the thing that introduced me to sort of, like, that disjointed sort of time narrative thing, right? He's going back and forth between different time periods, and you're seeing people at different points in their lives, and you're not quite sure exactly how the order of events is happening. I mean, hell, like, the man's first movie is Memento, right? Like, yeah. Like, he loves this shit. And also, like you said, we've seen him do Batman, which is, there's some of those, but it's mostly like a standard flashback. Yeah. Or like a setup almost, you know? Yeah. And I don't know. I want to see Christopher Nolan do smaller movies. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff that I liked from him. Don't get me wrong. I'm an Interstellar fanboy. I will apologize for the scene about love holding the universe together every day. But I want to see him do smaller movies. I've watched a lot of video essays, as we've talked about, on YouTube, and one of my favorites that I didn't mention in that episode, because I can't remember who it is and I can't find it anymore, is this one about how, like, he he's continued to follow this path of making larger and larger movies that, I mean, is eventually going to lead to him losing relevance, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. He compares him to other directors that I don't know enough about film history to say right off the bat, but
I think one of the other things that holds this movie back for me is a thing that is true about me personally, which is that there is an art film from the late 1950s. It came out in 1958 or 1959. There is a film called Hiroshima Mon Amour. And Hiroshima Mon Amour is an art film that is like a 24 hours with these two people, one who is a Japanese man, one who is a French woman. And through this love affair interaction that they have, it basically unravels the stories of their lives and the harms that they experienced during the war. And like at the end of the movie, essentially, they turn to face each other, right? She says to him, "Your name is Hiroshima." And he says to her, "Your name is Nevers," the French town that she's from. So it is this like, and it is a reconciling, an attempt to understand the experience of living through the knowledge of the bombing of Hiroshima. And there are like actual, like, you know, video reel and newsreel of the bombing of Hiroshima in the film. And it's an important part of the narrative, as well as like Nazi subjugation of anti-war protesters, which she is positioned as. I don't know. It's just very, that movie profoundly changed how I experienced film. It was the first art film that I saw that was truly an art film, right? Not like a Quentin Tarantino art film, like truly an art film told with a perspective about true events in a way that captivated my attention and changed how I think about the world and media and what is possible through storytelling and film. And interestingly enough, Hiroshima Mon Amour uses some of the same back and forth in time techniques. It is a disjointed timeline. You are talking to them in the present, and you are talking to them 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and they are telling you stories, and these people are stand-ins for ideas and emotions more than they are, you're supposed to connect with them as like characters or people, right? It is an extended metaphor and conversation and tension. So I don't know. I think I like that in some ways. I think set it up so that I expected more of this movie. I expected more interrogation, more, I don't know. There were also some other choices, like the way that the scoring, like the continuous scoring, also made it feel like a dressed up little story all the time.
Oh,
I don't know if you noticed that. I didn't like it. It wasn't
the
for
thing
me.
that I loved about that specifically was the movie never really lets you sit in your seat and just be calm, right?
True.
And because the score is always doing something a little off kilter, right?
Yeah.
It's not always in your face. It is often that, but it is always doing something you don't expect.
Yeah.
And that's, you're not supposed to feel comfortable in that movie.
Yeah. I think that is true. I think you're not supposed to feel comfortable. And I say all of this, I actually think like it is not a film that I'm rushing to see again, but it's not one I'm telling people not to go see.
Yeah, that's
I do
true.
think that it's worth seeing, right? Like, I do think that it's worth seeing. I think that it is a good film. I think that it asks interesting questions. I think that it tells a good story. I think that there's not a bad performance in the film. No. The acting is
Emily
impeccable.
Blunt, what the fuck?
Emily Blunt, truly, and like Robert Downey Jr., notably for me, that's the first role that I've seen him in decades where I truly like kept forgetting that it was him, right? Versus like the way Elizabeth said it was his first movie where he hasn't played himself, and he did kind of play himself.
He hasn't really acted in 10 years, like
yeah, exactly. So you know, there's not a bad moment in the film. but it just didn't leave me feeling, and I don't know that it's, what would a movie that left me with like a specific feeling about Oppenheimer be?
Yeah.
But I think that it made me feel like meh.
Yeah. So my hunch about what that movie might be, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, at least I think this is what it'd be for me, is maybe not a movie that is 1,000,000% about Oppenheimer. So I don't think that if you're trying to make a biography, I get it. This is not the point, right? But I don't know if in my opinion, you have 50% of the movie, which doesn't need to be there, right? Could you have spent some of that time on parts of the story that you could have relegated to throwaway lines? I'm thinking specifically of when they're like building up Los Alamos and they're like, what are you going to do with the people that live there? You know? Yeah. And like, there's a whole native population that we as a country kicked out. We do this all the time with native populations, right? Like it's like we're rife with this in our history. And then when it's done, he's talking to President Truman. He's like, what should we do with Los Alamos? He's like, give it back to them, right?
Yeah.
And like those are the two lines about that entire thing. And I've seen plenty of content from people whose families, lived there when this happened, saying like, okay, but where are we in this story?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that too. And I do think that is like a really, really interesting interrogation here, right? In the scenes where he is being pressed on why he has changed his tune about the H-bomb and he is so against the H-bomb versus the A-bomb, right? The way that, the narrative frames it is like, it's pointing you towards the tension of what people think of him versus how he thinks of himself, right? And nowhere in that line of questioning is there an acknowledgement of like the immense harm that testing did to large groups of Americans, right? Because
or to Japanese people, right? Like that's another
right?
perspective I kept waiting to show up in some way.
I agree. I actually didn't expect the interrogation of like the harm of Japanese people to be part of this, because it is so clearly the picture that Oppenheimer is painting both of himself and that other people are painting of him is one that is truly patriotic.
Yeah, that's true.
And rooted deeply in patriotism. I don't expect to see and it is very clearly, it is not that he is horrified by the harm that he has done to people. It is that he is horrified that the thing that he made, that he intended for them to either use or not use, and once using it, never do again, that they did it twice, right? Like, and that is actually another kind of throwaway thing, right? I think a very pivotal moment and an important moment in understanding the Oppenheimer that Nolan is depicting, right, is when he very firmly reminds the general Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And his beef is that they did it twice, right? Not that they did it at all.
Right.
His beef. What a childish way to talk about one of the most catastrophic and devastating periods of human history. All that to be said, I don't know. I certainly will think more and process more of it, but I think that there is such a real story of consequence somewhere in that film, and it didn't feel like that was I didn't get the story of consequence.
Yeah. Yes. The thing I kept missing in that last third of the movie where they're really trying to get into his head about why he feels so bad, right? Was like, it doesn't feel like guilt, right? Yeah. It doesn't, and like that's what I was expecting to see, right? And that's, from what I understand culturally before watching this movie, Oppenheimer to have felt, right? I have not read a biography of Oppenheimer. I have not gone directly to the source to know these things. Maybe Nolan actually knows that this is the thing he was upset about. He was more upset about the people involved, right, than he was anything else. But I don't know. It was a strange way to spend the last hour of a movie that I was already tired of being in.
It was too long. It was too long.
Again, I actually think it's a good movie and technically very excellent. It's just, I don't know.
I think it was a good movie. I think I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I think those two things are different.
That's fair. That's fair.
Truly, from a critical standpoint, like if I was to be a movie critic about it, I would have less critical things to say. Did me personally, did I like it? No.
Yeah, that's fair. And then I told you I was going to tell you this. I have not seen Barbie because I thought Jonathan didn't want to watch it because he very loudly said he didn't want to watch it. And then this weekend was like, what are you talking about? I want to go see that movie. So we're going to see Barbie. And I think AC and I are going to talk about it on an episode next season. That's actually 3 episodes we have planned.
Okay. We might have to do an emergency summer AC screams about Barbie into the microphone, although I do want to see it again before he screams about it into the microphone. I got so close to the mic. I have to not do that when I get so excited.
You can get close to the mic. It's actually better.
I can't believe that Greta Gerwig made that movie just for me. And I know that I'm not the only person to express that feeling, but I also, Matt, I feel like this is a funny moment to tell you is like, okay, obviously I'm a Greta Gerwig guy, but I'm also a Christopher Nolan guy. And when I was talking to some coworkers about whether or not I was going to see Oppenheimer and like Christopher Nolan, I was like, listen, the thing is that if I was a straight man, like I would be the most annoying man on the planet. The things that I like the most are like Christopher Nolan movies and comics, and I have really pretentious opinions about food and drinks. Like I would be the worst hipster, you know.
Are you gonna tell me about
thankfully,
The Wire?
Okay, listen. No. But I would like to talk to you about The Sopranos, actually.
Okay.
Anyway. That's 20 minutes about Oppenheimer.
20 minutes about Oppenheimer, and I got more content for you, too. So AC and I are tossing around this idea of eventually doing a real segment where we tell you about the things we've been texting each other about.
LOL.
But the latest thing that I've been texting them about is seasons basically 3 and 4 and the beginning of 5 of Game Changer on Dropout. Once again, we talk about Brendan Lee Mulligan on this show.
Great website. Incredible content.
So I was sick a couple weekends ago. And I just was like, you know what? This is a great time. I am just going to power through season 3 of Game Changer because I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy it because it was like the Zoom season, right? And I was like, I'm just going to do it all today. I am so happy that I did that. And then season 4, when they're back on set, it's perfection. And they
so good.
Go so nuts.
It's so good. I think, okay, I would like to know, do you have a favorite moment from season 4?
Yeah. So in season 3, and I mentioned this one to you in text, but in season 3, they're doing this, was it Secret Santa? I think.
What are they doing?
When Grant O'Brien has to tweet at a porn star and be like, hey, I had a problem with your OnlyFans, right? I think it's a Secret Santa episode, which basically means he stole what he thought was a prize, and it turned out to be like a punishment or something like that.
Yeah.
And he tweets at this guy, Ty Mitchell, who's just somebody that he watches. And Ty responds like, oh, hey, baby, like, DM me and we'll get it figured out, or something like that. And of course his post has like all his like College Humor fans like, liking and replying to it and shit.
Yeah.
And to spoil a season 4 episode, I don't remember the details. I just remember they bring Ty Mitchell onto the show to like do a little tiny segment called Sex Toy or Dog Toy, where they have to decide
sex toy or dog toy.
Yeah, where they have to decide like, what this object is. And basically the joke is that Ty always thinks it's a sex toy.
Yeah. Which is very funny because some of them are very obviously dog toys.
Right. But they just like one up themselves in like who they bring on the show and what they do for people. There's a whole episode I don't want to spoil that is all focused on Jess that made me weep.
So sweet. Okay, I have many favorite moments. There is so much. I think like the official cast recording is such a good episode.
Oh my God.
Don't Cry is such a good episode.
Yeah.
Like there's so much in this show that is remarkable. But honestly, one of the funniest things I like ever is In the very first episode of season 4, when they're back and the vibes are impeccable, Izzy, Lou, Brennan, a perfect storm. There are many of my favorite. That is one of the funniest episodes of all time. Sam says,
"Oh my god,
it is up there.
Yes.
One of the funniest episodes of all time." Izzy's joke about buttholes, and she's like, buttholes everywhere, and Sam is like, can you be more specific? And Brennan screams, you heard the woman. Like, she said buttholes.
They're suggesting basically VFX for the episode, and then they've like put cartoon buttholes all over the screen
everywhere, and then different buttholes, and then more buttholes, and then a Steven Soderbergh joke about buttholes. Anyway, that's not my favorite moment. I think the funniest thing, and I just know because I follow these people online, right? Like when the prompt is Sam says do something that will upset a producer, and Brennan walks out from behind the podium and wet coughs loudly at everyone, and this is like 2021.
Right.
This is like pandemic. Like Sam was like, I heard a gasp from the crew. And it's like, yes, Brennan did something shocking. Yeah. And also that's so funny. Yeah. Sam says like, I genuinely feel a little bit upset right now. And it's like, yeah, he did that because he knew it would upset you. And you said upset a producer. So he said, okay. Or the bird, I'll name every bird. like when they are trolling Brennan, that's in season 5. Anyway, the show really in season 4 and 5 it's so funny, seasons 1 through 3, and in 4 and 5 they have found their stride.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot over text about the Survivor episode. Which, if you are listening to this show, you have just heard our Survivor episode, and I have to tell you guys, AC has been watching a lot more Survivor, so that episode so much fucking Survivor worked
since then. And I also think that it's so funny that one of the things that I texted you was like, so in the Survivor episodes of Game Changer, Lou does a hilarious bit where he is like vocalizing the theme song of Survivor. And like, it was a funny bit when I first watched the episodes of Game Changer before I watched Survivor. And then after, one of the things that I texted Matt was that like, now after watching Survivor, that is one of the funniest things I have ever seen on television. Is Lou vocalizing.
That whole like 2-parter is like some of my favorite Game Changer.
If anyone has a loop-de-loop and would like to play it, now would be the time to do so.
What is a loop-de-loop?
I don't know, but I'm imagining
this is a fucking loop-de-loop.
Oh my god!
Do you think I fuck around? This is an immunity loop-de-loop. Any votes cast for Brennan will not count.
Oh my god!
Wow! You think I'm gonna fucking roll over? Wow! You look me in the eyes, Beardsley, and say, Brennan, I think it's your fucking time. It'll be a cold day in hell when I go out like a fucking chump.
The reason I posted on Threads, you think I'm gonna fucking roll over? Look me in the eyes, Beardsley. It's because like that, like, just like is to repeat in my brain all the time. You look me in the eyes, Beardsley.
Oh my god!
And like, I will try not to keep that part in the show. I'll hopefully put the actual clip there of Brendan being fucking hysterical. Anyway, that's Game Changer. You should watch it.
Yeah,
there's a really great episode in season 5 that was my introduction to the show, actually, which was the escape room episode.
Oh, the escape room episode is so good. The escape room episode is good on its own, and then it's just better once you like know them. Like these personalities. Like, I think this is like a very here's a segue for you. I'm gonna give it to you here. One of the things that I have loved the most about watching Game Changer is that, aside from Strange New Worlds, which we're going to talk about, the Dropout extended universe, right? Formerly College Humor, now Dropout, is like the first fandom that I have fallen headlong into in a long time. That is a new fandom for me entirely, like completely new. Obviously on the internet, I was a YouTube person. Like I was primed to be interested in this kind of content, and actually really going way back to my roots of being a Whose Line Is It Anyway guy. But now it feels harder and harder for things to fully grab me in this way. And this maybe seems ironic for someone who has a show where they talk about stuff that they can't stop talking about. Anyway, so let's talk about the other show that I've fallen headlong into.
Yeah, let's do that. So I just to get into Star Trek, the Star Trek of it all. Did you consume any Star Trek in like a meaningful way before Strange New Worlds?
Oh yes, I'm a longtime Trek person.
Okay, so you
I have watched TNG, Voyager. Voyager is my favorite. Deep Space Nine. I've watched the original. I used to watch Star Trek with my dad as a kid.
I was gonna ask, do I remember that your dad is a Star Trek guy?
Yes, yeah. And then I watched Discovery. I actually have not watched the last season of Discovery, but I read the synopsis because I wanted to start watching Strange New Worlds, and I will go back and watch the final season of Discovery. But it was just at a time when I had canceled my Paramount Plus subscription because I was trying to do away with that, and then I was like, no, it's worth it again.
Yeah.
So
at this point, I would cancel other things before that.
Yeah.
So I have never been a Star Trek guy.
Oh, interesting.
You know pretty well that I was very much a Star Wars guy. Not that it's like a competition, but also my like extremely nerdy one is I'm a big Stargate fan, right?
Yeah.
You absolutely know that. And we have watched Stargate together because I pushed for it many times. I don't know. That was just like a thing that I got to in high school because my friend Drew was also obsessed with it. And so we watched it together and his dad was into it. So whenever I was there, we would, I don't know, watch the new episode. But Star Trek was just like never a thing for me. It's not that I disliked it. Like TNG would be on like Spike TV when I was growing up, you know? And like I would catch an episode here or there. My dad, growing up was a big original series and then TNG fan. He like had a party with his friends the night that TNG, you know, came on TV for the first time.
Wow.
Like, but he never like, we never watched it together, right? The stuff we watched together was Star Wars. Was movies with cars in them because that's like his current thing.
Classic dad movie genre.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, he also loved Lord of the Rings, so that was a big deal for he and I, you know, when those came out.
My dad also, I went to see the first Lord of the Rings movie with my dad, and it was a big deal because I was not yet 13, and it was rated PG-13. My dad took me to see it.
Oh, really? My first, like, I am personally interested in this were the J.J. Abrams movies. And, like, those are fun movies, right? I really enjoy them. Beyond is fine. But like,
also, I would like to hold the moment of me. Star Trek movies, great movie. J.J. Abrams Star Trek, great movies. Oppenheimer, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think of myself as an intellectual.
Yeah. I enjoyed those movies. I was not like obsessed with them, right?
Sure.
I will watch them if they're on TV. My husband is a big Zoe Saldana fan, so you know, like we basically are required to watch it whenever it's on. Yeah. You know, but like I don't know. Like a couple years ago, I don't remember what happened. I think I was talking in Discord with some friends, and they were talking about Star Trek, and I think it's another one of those things where I was getting disillusioned with Star Wars, and I was like, I need something. Like I don't know what I want to watch. I'm gonna pick something, and I decided I was gonna watch TNG. Because if I was going to get into Star Trek, that felt like the way to do it. It was something I was familiar with. Yeah. I already knew I didn't like the original series. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But like I already knew it wasn't going to work for me. So I was like, I'm going to watch this. Watching that show took me a year.
Wow. Yeah.
Like it's an old style TV show. There's 22 something episodes a season. Right? Like
there's filler episodes. Yeah. It's dense. Yeah.
And like I'm not a person who skips a lot. You know, like Star Trek famously, you can kind of just pick up an episode and watch.
Correct.
And that's like one of the benefits of it. But like, that's not me. That's not my life.
Yes. It's a monster of the week formula. Yeah. So it's very much intended for a casual viewer in syndication to be able to pick up on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I watched it really slowly and was having a good time. And my plan after that was to start Deep Space Nine, which I have done. I haven't gotten through season 1. It's kind of a slog right now. But, you know.
It's really good.
I know that people love Deep Space Nine, and I just have to get through season 1. That was the situation with Next Generation as well.
Sure. Yeah.
But as I was watching this, people kept talking about Strange New Worlds. Everyone was like, oh my God, this is the closest thing to TNG in like years. Yeah. This is the Planet of the Week format, like back in its like original incarnation, just like updated for our times. And like people were so hype about it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll watch that before I watch DS9. And there was only 10 episodes, right? So
there's only 10 episodes.
I literally, for like 2 full seasons of watching TNG, I had Strange New Worlds like pinned to my up next on the Apple TV, like ready to go. And I was like finishing TNG so that I could watch Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, go back a bit. The reason I started this whole project was because Picard looked interesting.
Oh, sure.
At this point, I'm like, I'll get to it eventually. I hear it's not super great, but like, I'll watch it, you know?
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but it's on my list.
AC, I powered through the first season of Strange New Worlds in like 4 days.
Yeah.
And that was
easy. 10 episodes, 2 days, clear it. Yeah.
And like, that was longer than it really needed to take.
Sure.
So what I want to do for our listeners is like pitch this show to them.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you as quick of a pitch as I can and then get into a little bit more detail. So what is Star Trek Strange New Worlds? Technically, it is a prequel to Star Trek, the original series, right?
Correct.
So it's a show that's full of classic characters, full of some characters that maybe didn't have as big roles in the original series that are more fleshed out or more explored here. And then there's also new characters. And I think the show is made in its characters, right? In the way that I enjoy Lost because of the people that you are watching, not necessarily like the plot week to week, right? And that's kind of why I'm a Lost apologist.
Yeah.
Like this show is doing character first stuff and like also delivering really good weekly narratives, right?
Yeah.
So these are characters, the ones that, you know, were there all the time, were, you know, Spock. You run into Kirk every once in a while, right? He's kind of a recurring character. But then you have characters like Captain Pike, who was the captain of the Enterprise at this time. You have number 1, Una Chin Riley, right? Who this is the first time apparently in like film or TV that she's ever been given a name.
Yeah.
You have Nurse Chapel, you have Dr. Mbenga. All of these characters existed in the original series to some extent, some more than others, right? But they're being fleshed out in a way in this show that they weren't before. And you have new characters like Ortega and Hemmer and La'an. I love all 3 of them. And the show is just like delivering character moments every fucking episode that just endear you to these people. I rewatched the first 5 episodes today. I didn't watch them all, but I like kind of scrolled through them just to like get a sense of like the beginning of this show.
Yeah. And
they all get like at the very least like a 30-second moment where like you really feel their emotions, right?
Yeah.
Just in the first 2 episodes.
I would say maybe even in just the first episode. The premise of the first episode does a lot to root the characters in place so that you understand who they are, jumping in quickly. And I think that like that is to the show's credit.
Yeah. I do think also that the show, specifically because it does the Planet of the Week thing, is like upending kind of not even a trend, just like a way of being in television that Prestige TV brought us, right?
Yeah.
And doing the Planet of the Week thing allows us to see those characters in different ways, right? When you're in that of overarching story mode and you're having to continue on the plot, people almost, even though the plot moves, the people get stagnant sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And this lets them interact in different ways every hour of television.
Yeah. So my favorite Star Trek series is Voyager, which is in many ways a like smashing together. It tries Voyager more than other Star Trek shows, in my opinion. Tries to do both. Tries to do both a long-term, like clear narrative storytelling, which is that the Star Trek Voyager was patrolling the D sector of space, the far reaches of space, when I think it's the D sector. They are far from sector A, and their warp drive fails, and they're traveling back to the A sector manually, basically, and it is going to take them longer than their lives to get home, right, is the idea. And they're so far from any subspace relay that they can't get a message back, like all of this kind of stuff. They're far beyond the edge of Federation space. And so there are many Planet of the Week type episodes where they're encountering things far beyond the edge of Federation space, right, that are like new. But there is also a long narrative of people are isolated on this ship. They now live on this ship in a way that they have not lived on the ship before, right? They live there 100% of the time. There's no docking. There's no parking the ship and going off on planet or whatever. There are away missions, right? But they are fewer and farther between and perhaps more dangerous, and like just different, right? And so there's like a lot of like the show is like reconciling that experience, right? And then Discovery, which is my other favorite, does the opposite, and it is only narrative, right? Like there's a little bit of Planet of the Week in Discovery, but it is primarily one story told over the course of many.
Yeah, and the people that I know that, or the people I've heard of that don't like what's called new Trek, basically by the fans, right? Often criticize Discovery for that reason. And I'm not talking about like racist asshole fans. I'm talking about just fans that are normal and don't like new Trek, right?
I think the thing is like, I love Discovery because I loved that take on it. And I too loved the J.J. Abrams movies. And I really, really enjoyed the storytelling that Discovery did. And you can't make a show with Michelle Yeoh in it and have me not like it at this point. Like, I love Michelle Yeoh and I want to watch everything that she's in. So I enjoyed it a lot. But I will also say that, like, watching Strange New Worlds, the first things that I noticed were that it brought back that Monster of the Week format. And this is like seeing people talk positively about it online, but not seeing a lot of chatter about it. And I'm thrilled. I agree with that assessment that like, this is the return of Monster of the Week, and it's really fun, and it makes it easy. And perhaps here's a strong, selling point. My partner is not a Trek person. Has watched a few episodes with me here and there. I've tried to get her to watch Next Generation with me, and you know what? I admit, if you are not a sci-fi geek, it is a hard sell. Some of the older stuff, especially. Strictly, not because it's not good. Strictly because of like what our modern understandings of like what television should look and feel like are. But I was watching an episode and I fell asleep on the couch, and she came out into the living room with the intention of sitting down and changing the TV to something else, and actually just got fully sucked into the episode that I was watching, and then woke me up and asked me if we could start it over again.
Amazing.
So that she could watch it from the beginning. And now we have finished season 1 together. So I've watched season 1 3 times in full in the last week and a half.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I do want to say one thing, and it's actually a positive the show that I wanted to call out in the pitch for this anyway, is that you and I have talked a lot about like the history of Trek and like how this show relates to others. Technically, the show is even a spin-off of Discovery while also being a prequel to the original series, right? Like none of that matters, right? If you have never watched Star Trek before, this is the way to get into Star Trek.
You need no knowledge, and it's simply setting you down into the setting and saying, we'll tell you everything you need to know.
I have never seen Discovery, and I don't really understand how it's a thing. I understand that there was like a season where all these characters were in it and they were kind of working with the Discovery crew and whatever. And then something happened and it birthed this show, right? Yeah. And like, I don't need to know what that is. The show in the first episode like kind of hints at, hey, this thing happened with the Discovery and it caused this situation that we're dealing with. Right. And that's all I need to know, right? All I need to know is that this happened before the original series, and that's why Spock is here. And like that is an incredible setup, and it's if it does or does not make you go watch more Star Trek after it, that's also fine. Like if you just want to watch this show, that's all you need to do.
Then it's a good show. It is worth just watching watching the show.
I will say, if you are the kind of person that's worried about like, hey, I don't know, like Star Trek kind of feels a little old, I really do like the sort of modern trappings of television, this show's Enterprise is fucking beautiful, and the way it is shot does not look like any other Star Trek show. Yeah. It is, and this is actually something they say, and they mean it slightly differently, but it's filmed like a prestige TV show. It's a film every episode, but it doesn't present itself in the same way. Like the stories are not prestige TV style stories. They're again that sort of Planet of the Week, Monster of the Week thing we've been saying. I literally was watching Star Trek Ready Room on YouTube before you got on the call, and Jonathan Frakes, who directed a recent episode, Riker from TNG, was saying that like they treat it as a new film every episode to kind of let the directors do what they want to do, but also to say like, hey, this one can be horror. Hey, this one can be there was a recent episode that was a very political military thriller, which was new for me and the show and was incredible, right?
Yeah.
Like
it was really good.
So there's good stuff happening in the show, and like, I don't know, you'll find something that's worth it for you. There was a straight up comedy episode recently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's also worth like, some people's have had complaints with Discovery, and I think like including not just the racist fans, right? Certainly there was much discourse about Discovery and the way like the racist and homophobic fans felt about the inclusion and introduction of people who were clearly queer, who were clearly people of color, and putting those people at the forefront of Starfleet and the narratives that we were hearing. But I also think that there was some fairness in like, sometimes it was a little ham-fisted in that it's like clearly got a perspective. Now, I won't pretend that Strange New Worlds doesn't have its little moments of ham-fistedness because it certainly does. But it feels like those moments are more ham-fisted in the way that I am used to Star Trek being, which is like that they're ham-fisted in like a political or like socio-philosophical way, right? Where they're positing some bigger question about the universe, but it also feels more understated in the other parts of the story in terms of like that inclusion of those kinds of stories as a normal part of the story, not like we're trying to make a point by including these people here.
Right. So there's a character in Strange New Worlds. I'm thinking specifically Ortega, right? And they do this thing in the first season where they're like, we haven't really figured out what we think about Ortega yet, right? And Ortega she's a Latina, and like the actress has talks, specifically about like gender and queerness and stuff like that. But like, I kept looking I was like, I don't know, what are this person's pronouns? Like I'm just like curious, right? And the show is not like out here being like, my pronouns are they, them. My pronouns are he, him. It's not doing that. It's just referring to people, and you assume that everyone's got it right. And
I will say, they do introduce a non-binary character.
We're going to talk about them.
Who has a whole monologue about being non-binary.
Yes. The best episode of season 1, for what it's worth.
My God. Oh my God.
But Ortega is there, and like, I don't know. She, like, you look at her, you're like, that looks like a lesbian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, like she gives off some lesbian vibes.
She's got big dyke energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I loved them introing her, and then just like them being like, we're gonna let Matt sit with that information, and like not answer my question for a while.
Yeah, and there's no need to. And then also like later, there's an episode where they're in an imagined scenario, not imagined. That's not the right word. A projected scenario, and she's just like a knight, just like as a matter of, and they call her Sir Adya. Like, chill.
Like, exactly. There's the ways,
and there's no confusion about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is there's no confusion in any situation. So while OG Star Trek, right, was definitely progressive for its time, but has its problems, right? Very famously has its problems. This show is not like trying
some very anti-Semitic problems.
Yeah. This show is not trying to like recreate those for canon or something like that.
Right.
It's just, and it's not even trying to comment on it. It's like, look, we can be a science fiction show and have all of those concerns about canon and whatnot, and also just like treat humans like humans and like bring people to the show you've never seen before, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like every time it happens, it's like I get excited, right?
Yeah.
I have a episode I want to talk about later where there's a strong component in the first season and then the beginning of the second season with regards to race and like metaphors around race, and the first person to talk about it and relate it to race is a black woman. And I was like, it's just a show that like does that, and you like no other TV show would do that. It's not that they would like intentionally fuck it up, they just like wouldn't think that hard about it. You know what I mean? And like, I don't know. Every time I'm watching it, it's not like beating you over the head with a message. It's just like subtly doing the correct things every now and again.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Man, you know what? That's a great reason that I just love Dropout.tv. As well as Strange New Worlds. But yes,
so I'm going to quick set up the show for people, and then we can get into a few episodes that I want to talk about. So the setup for the show, like I said, happens in Star Trek Discovery. Show I've not seen. Show AC has seen.
I have seen, yes.
Like I said, I understand there's an entire season that basically acts as a backdoor pilot for Strange New Worlds. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Where there's like recurring characters that are Enterprise characters.
Yes.
And then the characters that we're seeing largely from the original series. It's a prequel to that show. And like I said, Captain Pike, the former captain, if you're talking about like the Kirk era, right, is the captain of the Enterprise. Again, I mostly didn't even look that up because I want you to understand that you can enjoy the show without like having to do that. The interesting thing that has happened is that at the beginning of the show, it tells you, and I assume that this was in a Discovery scene that I haven't seen, that Pike knows that he is going to have some terrible accident 10 years from the beginning of this show.
Yeah.
He knows he saves a bunch of children from some disaster, and it like horribly disfigures him and basically leaves him, needing to be cared for at all times, unable to, do his duties. And he's like basically facing that future every day, knowing that's going to happen 10 years from now. And the first time we see Pike, he's like in this beautiful cabin in the middle of the mountains, and he has this really long hair and like beard that is out of control, but also I'm extremely attracted to him the entire time. He's like,
it's giving mountain man.
Yeah, he's like riding horses and shit. But his whole vibe in this moment is like, I'm like hot in a different way, but actually this is my grubby look, and I'm that way because I don't want to go back to the Enterprise because I'm scared, right? Like,
I actually really love that exchange between him and the Admiral in that early moment where what Pike says to the Admiral is, you don't want me anywhere near that ship, and what the Admiral says is, you have us confused.
Yeah, oh my god, that line is incredible.
And that's so it's chef's kiss.
Yeah.
I want her crewed up and ready to fly by 1800. Send someone else. You don't want me in command of that ship. You're getting us confused. You don't want you in command.
What a good introduction. That is in the first 5 minutes of dialogue of this show, and tells you and sets you up for, yes, it is going to be quippy. Yes, it is going to be a little bit predictable. But yes, it is going to check all of the boxes for you if you are a person who likes a formulaic, if a little cheeky, like setup in your dialogue like I do, that feels like it's not. There is some of the writing in the show that is like good writing, like truly good writing, but not all of it has to be like that tier, right? It's not all S tier, but it is all A tier.
Correct. Yeah. I just want to say Anson Mount is a beautiful man. And it's like a significant part of the reason that I watched this show.
You know what? Yeah. Everyone actually on the cast is super hot.
Oh, they're all super hot. But before I watched the show, Anson Mount was the only one I could like form in my head. Also, two things that I found out while researching this episode. He played Black Bolt in the MCU.
What?
So the terrible show Inhumans, he was there. But also, he was in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
Oh. Well, you named the two Marvel properties that I haven't seen.
Oh, okay. So spoilers for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It's the multiverse. They go to another world where there's a bunch of like they go to another universe where there's a bunch of like alternate universe heroes, and one of them instead of the Avengers, they have the Illuminati. It's a reference to the comics, and Black Bolt is one of the Illuminati.
Okay.
And it was a funny thing because he got pulled into the movies after he was in this terrible show no one watched that got canceled after 2 episodes.
Okay.
Also, you ready for this? He stars opposite of Britney Spears in the movie Crossroads.
Wait. Oh my god. Is this why? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. All right. So the thing is that now that you've said that, actually, now I realize I thought that he just looked familiar to me because he looks like a guy who would look familiar.
Yeah.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah.
Crossroads. Wow.
You mentioned the scene with the Admiral, right? So the Admiral comes to like get him, and he's like trying to get him back on the Enterprise. He basically gives him the order that needs to be back on the Enterprise. They're going to go save Unich Riley, number 1, because she has decided that downtime is not for her and gotten captured on this planet. Doesn't matter why. But the number 1 thing I thought was like, it's like 30 seconds between the moment where he's looking all scruffy. It's like mid-morning. He's talking to the Admiral on like, with his horse next to him. And then the Admiral's like, by 1800 hours, you need to be on that ship and, out of the docks or whatever. And this man has packed up his things, has boarded his horse, has gotten to the Enterprise, and gotten a perfect haircut and shave.
Yeah.
And is like,
it's the future, Matt. Anything is possible.
You know, like, the whole time I'm like, how did this man get like a fade between now and then? The pilot is so interesting. If you know anything about Star Trek, you may have known the phrase "the Prime Directive." There's probably words out there. This is me not being a Star Trek super nerd, but it basically says that like you can't interfere with a civilization. I don't know. That's the Prime Directive.
That's a rough approximation of the Prime Directive.
There's probably words out there. But what are they calling it in the first episode? Like General Order...
General Order 1.
Yeah, General Order 1. And the point is that like this is early enough that the Prime Directive hasn't been like, you know, solidified. And what is fucking hysterical is that the crew of this Enterprise is the reason that General Order 1 becomes the Prime Directive, which is the thing that like underwrites every other Star Trek show.
I thought that was a very funny little touch. They call it General Order 1 in Discovery, I believe.
Which makes sense for the time.
Honestly, the most important thing to know about the Prime Directive is it is a directive of non-interference that is the fundamental premise of what these people should be doing in space, except that the premise of the show is just all of the reasons why they never pay attention to the Prime Directive. Mm-hmm. They bring it up, they say, but that would violate the Prime Directive, and then they choose to do it anyway. Almost every time, almost without fail.
Yeah, literally, Pike says in this episode, screw General Order 1. Those are words he says.
And, like, yes, it's the premise that underwrites, like, many other episodes, but it's also, like, the funniest little joke in Star Wars that, like, the Prime Directive is never to interfere, and every captain that you follow on the show of Star Trek has a thing about wanting to help people because that's what the Federation does, right. And so they choose to interfere pretty much all the time.
There's a whole plot line that lasts a couple seasons in The Next Generation where like Picard is potentially going to be put on trial for violating Prime Directive, and then it does happen, right? Like Star Trek loves a trial episode. We're going to talk about one today. I don't know, the first episode I want to talk about, and I just kind of want to talk about things I love in this episode. So the premise of this episode, beyond like getting on the ship and all that, is that they have basically accidentally, through the whole thing with the Discovery and some wormhole that I don't really know what it's for, have like accidentally made this planet aware, right, of warp technology and the existence of alien planets, right? This society is like roughly at like our level of societal progression, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And like
still pre-warp, but what they say is that they're 1 year from having warp technology.
Right. And like like they basically just got access to warp technology too early. And so the first thing that they've done with it is build a bomb, right, to deal with some like a civil war essentially on the planet.
Yes.
This is like a very classic Star Trek setup, I just have to say.
Yes. It's giving New Earth. Yeah. It's giving they've done this exact kind of episode. I mean, there's famously one where they like go back in time to like Earth like 1990s or whatever, and it's chaos, you know.
I mean, the Star Trek 4, isn't that also a time travel back to...
There's many time travel stories, so yes.
I'm like, the Voyage Home. Yeah, it's like 1986 San Francisco. Yeah. It's the Save the Whales
That's what
movie.
I was thinking of. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, yeah. And that's not the only time that they go back in time to Earth or to New Earth or to a planet that is much akin to Earth, humanoids doing the same stuff.
One of my favorite bits happens because they have to like steal like uniforms so they can sneak into this place. Yeah. And they send the people that they have stolen the uniforms from back to the Enterprise, like sedated. And one of the guys like wakes up and starts running around the ship. And Nurse Chapel chasing this man through the ship is like, for some reason, one of the most hysterical things to me.
Yeah.
And then like Uhura immediately gets to show off her like prowess, right, as a communicator, right, as just like a general like expert of like alien knowledge, because she chats up this guy on the turbo lift about like the local sport on his planet, and he's like, you know what that is, you know the teams, you know the history, and she like gets him talking about it because she knows when they get off the turbo lift, like it's gonna get taken care of if she can distract him long enough. And then they get off the turbo lift, and Chapel is like right there and just like sedates him immediately, and he falls on the ground, and she goes, "Got him."
Nurse Chapel. Honestly, there isn't a character on this show that I don't love. I will say Hemmer is the one who took me the longest to warm up to. But by the end, I mean, Hemmer had my whole heart.
Immediately, yeah.
It's such a fun introduction to like what you will get to expect from Nurse Chapel's character too. Right. The like chaos joy vibes that she brings.
Yeah, in this, I don't have the second episode written down, but in the second episode, she is like, what do they call them? Hypo sprays, right?
Yeah.
She's like giving that to all the people that are about to go on this away mission, and they're all kind of like wincing because she didn't tell them it was going to hurt. And she's like, "I've had people run from me." And then I forget exactly what she says, but she makes like a little flirty, quippy thing to Spock, who we know is engaged to be married at this point.
Yes.
And he also, because he's Spock, he's not picking up on like the hint, right?
Yeah.
And Uhura gives, like, she's hilarious, to be fair. Like, Chapel is really funny in this moment, and, like, it's showing off those two characters. But Uhura just, like, looks at them and makes a face, and she immediately clocks what's going on between Spock and Chapel.
She's always staring at them, and it's so cute to me, actually.
Yeah. I don't know. That, to me, is... I don't know. I guess there's one more moment in the pilot. I forget exactly what's happening. They're on the bridge. And they're talking about like something that's happening. I don't know if they're about to take off or whatever, but Uhura just like is like grinning, and she goes, "Cool." And,
yeah. Yeah. One thing I remarked that I really like about to my partner, that I really, really like about Uhura's character, and this is through the series, right? Is we have not often gotten a perspective of someone who is new to working in space in a way where it's not like, oh, they're the newbie, they're gonna die, right? It's like she's new, and you get to, one of the things you get to experience along with her character is like her actually coming to terms with the enormity of space, the coolness, like the cool factor of like you work in space, right?
You good?
Yeah. I'm standing on the surface of a comet.
Obviously, like one of the big plot lines in season 1 for Uhura is her finding her place in Starfleet.
It's the
feeling
whole
like
second episode is like dedicated to this idea that she's not sure if she wants to be there, and she's trying to find a place for herself, right?
Yeah, and that continues even until the last episode of season 1, right? She is saying that she's planning to go back home, right? And so like but getting to see like that moment of her being like cool, or like when they in episode 2 when they go to the asteroid and she steps onto the asteroid and she's just like fully aware that she is in space by herself for the first time. Not by herself, she's with her crew, right? But like that she is in NBD, just experiencing the vastness of space with my own human eyes, right? Like
she's also experiencing that danger for the first time, right? Because that's when Sam Kirk, like his heart stops because it doesn't matter. But like she's realizing like, oh, we could die here. We can't get back to the Enterprise, right?
Yeah, and it's really cool to get to see that and to have that be a recurring character, not a one-off character, someone who has like reverence and like joy for the reason that so many of us like the show, right? Which is imagining a world where we could travel to space.
Yeah. I also love what at this point, we're just talking about episode 2, but I love what they do with her. And this was actually the example that I had in my head when we talked about how quickly the show endears you to people. She kind of gets hazed a little bit to like show up to this dinner at Pike's, quarters in like dress uniform.
You said it was formal.
Actually, what I said was you might want to wear your dress uniform.
Are you kidding? This is your idea of a practical joke.
General Ortega's Cadet Uhura, welcome. Dress uniform, huh?
But then she shows up, she's really uncomfortable, but she starts to like get used to this crew, right? And Pike asks her like where she sees herself in 10 years, and that's when she kind of says, I don't know that I want to be in Starfleet. She talks about why she gets into Starfleet and tells this really deeply traumatic, but also like very, I don't know, well-delivered and like short, concise story that gets you like interested in her as a person, right? And she's talking about, how she grew up in Kenya and all this stuff, and then and her family and these things, and those things end up at the end of the episode, those was what ended up saving the day. Right.
Yeah.
Like, those are the tools, the songs that she knew when she was a kid that her mother sang to her end up being the things that help her figure out the answer to this, translation problem that she's got with this alien device.
Yeah. It's remarkable. It's a very cool, she's a very cool character. She's a character that is a joy to watch and that I would die for, as I would die for anyone on the crew.
Celia Rose Gooding, also speaking of extremely hot, beautiful, beautiful person.
What other episodes did you want to talk about?
So I want to talk about episode 7, the Serene Squall. And I also want to talk about episode 8, the Elysian Kingdom.
Okay. 2 of my faves.
Yeah.
I hope that we might get to talk about Elysian Kingdom. I was going to tell you that was what I wanted.
Yeah. So I think
talk
that
about
these,
for sure,
these 3 episodes are my favorite of the season.
Yeah.
I watched, like I said, the first 5 again today, and there's zero filler in this.
Yeah.
It's they're 10 episode seasons, so there really can't be.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that is just like a huge mess. But these are the ones that really stand out.
I will say I love Spock-a-Mock. I love which is episode 5 where they do their little body swap moment.
So the Spock in this show is much younger, and he is engaged to Pring. And the whole premise of this episode is that he has a very important negotiation coming up, and she is basically, she's like a rehabilitator. She works with Vulcan prisoners to help them understand logic again, so that they might change their ways or live better in society.
And you might not know this, but this is actually a direct reference to an episode from the original series.
Oh, really? Who switches bodies on that?
They do.
Oh,
the
those
two of them do. Yes, yeah. Anyway, it's just, or that is where T'Pring is. Maybe they don't switch bodies, but T'Pring is a character from the original series who is introduced in an episode that's called Amok Time.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't know that, but I enjoyed it anyway.
Yes, correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's a great episode. There's a twist on this episode in season 2 as well that I had a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
I will say, you said you've only seen how many episodes in season 2?
The first 2.
Okay.
Ad Astra Per Aspera.
Oh man, we gotta talk about that one.
Per Aspera.
Yeah. The Serene Squall.
Anyway, the Serene Squall. Oh my god.
I mean, can you give the pitch for this episode?
The thing is about the Serene Squall is okay, how much do you like watching television where people are really hot? Because if that's your thing, you should definitely watch the Serene Squall, if only to observe Jesse James Keitel as maybe one of the hottest characters I've seen on TV in the last 5 years. A person named Angel. I was trying to decide how I would introduce them, whether or not I would spoil what their role in all of this is. How are we feeling? Are we going to talk about the details of the episode in a way that maybe if we're convincing people to listen to this, we should?
I don't know how we talk about this episode without talking about who this person is.
Okay.
That is I don't think we need to spoil the end, but
yeah, I think the thing is here, the conceit is that Dr. Angel is not who they appear to be.
Right. And to be fair, you know that pretty early if you're paying attention.
From the jump, yes.
Right? Yeah. I talked about this Tumblr post I wanted to bring, and it's basically just GIFs from this episode, and it's screenshots of Tumblr posts on GIFs of this episode. And so it's is it Dr. Aspen? I think it's Dr. Aspen.
Dr. Aspen, that's right.
So it's Dr. Aspen saying, "Thank you, this means everything to me." And the Tumblr post is, "Unreliable narrator to you, I believe them."
I think that there are so many things about this episode that are so fun. So it's a little bit of a reverse heist, if you will, right? They fall into a trap laid by pirates. This is a classic Star Trek premise, right? The vibes of the whole episode are so funny, if in large part because of the character of Angel, who is there as this very serious, they presented to the crew as an aid worker, but the show is doing the thing where it's this person, they're not who they seem. And also, they're definitely the bad guy. I think it's like, oh, you're supposed to believe that this aid worker is like just a cool, normal aid worker, and definitely not the villain, despite the fact that they're wearing a mesh, a black mesh panel bodysuit that it covers every inch of their body, and they have a million earrings in their ears and
like a Doctor Strange fucking popped collar and like a face tattoo,
like the most severe haircut you've ever seen on a person, blunt to the day. Anyway, they're so hot, and the episode is really funny, and also like a good episode, but like there's like a funny little subplot that you get for Pike and Rebecca Romaine. Why can't I remember her name?
Una? Yeah.
Number one, yes, Una. I just couldn't think of Rebecca Romaine, because when we were watching it and she first came on screen, my partner said to me, "Is that Rebecca Romaine Stamos?" And I said, "They got divorced."
But yes,
it's just Rebecca Romaine these days. Anyway, so yes, it is her. So the hook of the episode is, right, there's deceit in many directions happening here. You get a great like romantic tension storyline between Spock and T'Pring, right, who are like resolving their issues. Their relationship has become complicated, as T'Pring says it. You get a moment of like, Spock has to do something he doesn't want to do, but he thinks it's the only way to solve it. You get a remarkable moment between him and Nurse Chapel, convincing T'Pring that they're having an affair. I will say one thing that I do think that could make Star Trek Strange for New Worlds better is if more people kiss.
Agreed.
They should kiss more.
Oh, why did Captain Angel not kiss Captain Pike? That needed to happen.
Yeah. They should all just kiss. Like, is the thing. There should be more kissing, and I would like it more if there was.
Jesse James Keitel delivers this line, and it's so simple. Like, she's sitting on... to be clear, Jesse uses she, her.
Jesse
the character
uses she, her
uses
pronouns.
they,
Angel
them.
uses they, them.
Jesse is sitting in, like, the captain's chair for story reasons.
All right. See what this thing can do. Fire phasers. Oh, this is fun.
What is your objective? You have control of the ship.
Oh, this is fun. And, like, the person in that chair at that moment is not Captain Angel. It's Jesse James Keitel, like, living her life.
She's so hot. I know that I've said that like 4 times now, but like the thing is that I just like I am at a gay loss for words. I am so gay. I'm
honestly,
so gay.
That's like mostly what this episode is for me. This episode is like some good Spapple content. It is Jesse James Keitel, and it's just like a fun little romp. Like, Pike's like kind of a side character in the last 3 episodes. Well, I guess the last episode is mostly about him.
Yeah.
But like, he's really just a side character in this one.
Yes. And he's really doing his little side character hijinks, you know, and it's fun, and they're like, you know, they're inciting a mutiny and having their own little fun time over there, and everybody's like doing their own little bit to contribute to the mutiny, and it's fun and funny.
That's the Serene Squall. Do you have anything else to say about the Serene Squall?
Who knew? Well, sorry, that's a sarcastic who knew. Who knew my favorite episode in Star Trek Strange New Worlds would be about space pirates. That's only been my thing this whole time. I should be more specific. Queer space pirates.
Correct.
That's chef's kiss, right in my wheelhouse. And if that's your wheelhouse too, you should definitely watch all of the 6 episodes before this episode, the 7th episode of Strange New Worlds.
Yeah. You also should watch Our Flag Means Death, which only loses the space in that scenario.
Correct. Yes. I'm just gonna wager, like I would put $5 that if you're listening to this show, you've already.
I was
going to
say you've probably already watched that. I'm probably preaching to the literal choir at the moment. So, you said the Elysian Kingdom is an episode you definitely want us to talk about, and I totally know why.
This episode.
So, one of the things you said to me, or you said in our notes, was, "Hey, I missed the holodeck."
I miss the holodeck desperately. Like, that is one thing that New Trek is missing that is like one of my absolute favorite things about old Trek. I love holodeck episodes. I think they're so silly. They're so fun. And as like a person who loves TV and movies, there's such a clear reason for me why they exist, right? Like, it's about budget. It's about, wanting to do fun, different little stories, right? I love the ones where they're like in detective novels or doing a Sherlock Holmes thing or anything. I love, yes. I love the holodeck. And so I miss the holodeck a lot. And I loved the Elysian Kingdom because while it is not a holodeck episode, it is reminiscent of episodes where there is some sort of holodeck situation that leaks out onto the rest of the ship, a thing that happens more than one time, right? And that it's just such a good way for them to introduce that kind of element. And it's just, the episode itself is very good storytelling, and it's was very nice to see Dr. Mbenga get a primary storyline that was about his like big conflict, but wasn't about his big conflict in a way that felt sad at the end, in the way that it has in other episodes.
Right. So I think, and this happens in the first like 2 or 3 episodes, so it's not huge spoilers, but we're referring to Dr. Mbenga's big conflict. In the first couple episodes, he's really protective of the emergency transporter in the med bay, right? There's a episode early on where they're trying to sort of diagnose the problem with some of the like, viral and bacterial filters in the transporters and whatnot. And Hemmer, the chief engineer, comes over and like tries to fix it, and they have a little small altercation, and basically Hemmer leaves. And come to find out, the reason that he's so protective of it is because something or someone is stored in the pattern buffer of that transporter, and that person is his daughter, who has what I've been calling space leukemia. Yeah. Which is basically what it is.
Signaleukemia is what they call it, but yeah.
He's keeping her in there because when she's in the pattern buffer, she's not aging, her disease isn't progressing, but he can bring her out and read a story to her, every once in a while, and it keeps her able to be there semi-permanently. And it basically, lets him continue to try and find a cure for the thing that she's afflicted with. And his whole thing is like, hey, we're going to all these planets. One of them is going to have something we've never seen. Yeah.
And you know what? He's right. That they encounter technology that helps him think that he might be on the way to finding a cure.
Yeah.
And so, I love that the premise of this conflict. I think a lot of other characters have conflicts that we're more familiar with, right? Conflicts of, losing their families in, some sort of conflict in space, or coming to Starfleet by more traditional means of like having family members who are in Starfleet. But I love this version of there is knowledge out there that we do not have yet, and that could help. I love that premise. Yeah. So anyway, here we are.
Yeah.
He takes his daughter out of the pattern buffer on a regular basis, and he frequently reads her a story.
And it doesn't really matter why. You can watch the episode, and we're going to tell you the whole thing, but the whole premise of this episode is that he walks onto the bridge one day after some stuff has gone on, and everyone there is dressed in like storybook medieval gear, and it's claiming to be other people, and the ship is kind of dressed up like medieval times, right? I mean, like the restaurant / show medieval times, right?
It looks like Ren Fair exploded on a starship.
Correct. And like they're like going by other names and claiming to have other backgrounds, and they're referring to him as king, right? Is that what it is?
Yes, he is the king.
Yeah.
I came to see Ortegas.
Ortegas. Oh, you mean Sir Adia?
Come. Sir Adia. From the book.
The book, sire.
Is this some kind of a joke, Captain?
If it is jokes you desire, I could summon the court jester.
Summon the court jester! Hold the jester!
It's just... you're all dressed up like characters from the book I've been reading tonight.
And there's this conflict between all of them. Sonia Rose Gooding, Uhura, is playing this like evil, like ice queen kind of character, and she is fucking selling it. And I feel like they put Celia in that dress explicitly for me and the other gay men watching this show.
Really also maybe for little black girls everywhere too. But yes, also for you and
but
all
also
the other
me.
gay men watching this show. Yeah.
That, to be fair, this episode is the one that made me like go to Tumblr and be like, there has to be a fandom for this, right? The episode before was the one that I was like, okay, this show's incredible. But Elysian Kingdom was the one that made me go, okay, this is on Tumblr.
And I think that like the thing about this episode is that sometimes one of the things that I love about holodeck episodes, right, is that they're often very contrived, right? Like there is such a specific formula. And here the formula is at its best, right? Like it is contrived. It is familiar. If you have watched a Star Trek thing before, or if you've watched any thing where the story comes to life, right? And you're like, oh, I know what's going on here, right? But where Strange New Worlds hits its stride in relying on this formula is the actor who plays Dr. Mabenga is incredible. He has a quiet gravitas that lends to this kind of episode where, like, in many other scenarios on the ship, he's the straight man with a wink, right? In terms of like the comedy setup.
Right.
Maybe heterosexual. I don't know. That's never really talked about. So, but like he's the straight man with a wink and a nod. You know, he's in on the joke, but he is, you know, the one who is not making the joke usually.
Right. And he also has like a besides just his daughter, he has a very dark past, right? Like season 2 explores his history as a military doctor. Right. And like, and what that means for his service on this ship.
And it's clear that he has a close connection to another character, La'an's character, who is very explicitly, her violent past is explored in both seasons 1 and season 2.
Well, and so something that is explored in season 2 a lot is his relationship to Nurse Chapel and her service and their service together in the Klingon Wars.
Yeah. All of this to say, he brings this quiet gravitas to an impossible scenario where he's basically just like, what are you all doing?
He's like the last person that should be the main character of this like storybook fantasy.
And he's just kind of going around being like, snap out of it, maybe? Like, what, okay. Right. And he quickly puts it together. Right. He's quickly like, okay, something's going on. I just have to figure out whatever is going on.
And he like quickly puts together like this is the story that he reads his daughter. Right. Every time he brings her out of the pattern buffer. I also just want to call out Spock in this episode as like the mage that kind of looks like a rock star.
I think something that I really, really love about both this episode and I believe it is actually the beginning of episode 2 where we first meet where we first meet T'Pring. Spock has a dream where he is fighting himself because one of the big conceits for Spock period, right, is that he is half human, half Vulcan, and he is very conflicted about this half human, half Vulcan nature. The moments where we get to see the actor who plays Spock, not as Spock traditionally, makes me go, whoa.
Oh my God,
he's
AC,
a really
you're gonna
good
love
actor.
The rest of season 2. You're gonna love it so much.
Heck yeah. You know, I just think that like noticing Ethan Peck's, sorry, I can refer to him by his name. Noticing Ethan Peck's like incredible acting chops, like really truly coming to the surface in those moments where you realize like so much of Spock is just like he is actually making no facial expression so intentionally that it feels surprising when you see him express emotions in other places, and not just like when Spock, you know, taps into his anger,
right.
which he does. He gets big mad, understandably so. But
I wish that you all could see the like hand motions.
Gets big mad. He's like a little dinosaur. He's a big tough guy. Okay.
It's funny because I think of it very similar to the way we talked about Robert Downey Jr. in the beginning of the show, right? Like we have seen Robert Downey Jr. play himself for so long that watching him act, we're like, oh, this is a revelation, right? Yeah. Whereas like Ethan Peck, it's the opposite direction, right? Like we're watching him act all the time, never off. And the moments where we do get to see him sort of like bring that down a little bit and play a different version of a human Spock, right? Is like, oh, you're like, oh, you're really good at this, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason you're on the show.
And it makes the experience that much more immersive, right? And I think the other thing about this episode is that the storyline that it is weaving is one that tugs at the heartstrings and like plays on the fantastical possibilities of space, right? Without saying too much, right? That thing that he doesn't know, that Dr. M'Benga doesn't know what it is that is out there that could cure his daughter, one of those other possibilities comes to fruition in the telling of this story. My partner asked me at the beginning of this episode, basically like, is it sad? Like, does this thing happen? Is it sad? And I was like, well, I don't know. It is sad, but I don't know if it is tragic. Right?
Yeah,
like,
that's a good way to say it.
It's like this moment of finding the answer and not knowing before you've discovered the answer what the cost will be.
Right.
And it is a question of, are you willing to make the cost? Like, is the cost enough? You know, or is it too much? Right.
And it's that sort of bittersweet understanding that like sometimes the answer that you were seeking is not going to take the shape that you expected.
Sometimes it will do what you intend, but not in the way that you expect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is goofy fantasy, really, really fun acting, and like stellar science fiction. Yeah. It's the clearest maybe example of like why this show is like worth your time. Right.
Yeah.
Extremely Planet of the Week, but in a way that changes the characters moment to moment.
Yeah, but I think that's true, right? Like the Serene Squall and like this episode, these two episodes back to back are certainly emblematic of it, right? They take a somewhat kitschy, well-known premise, right? And despite you knowing the setup, despite understanding everything about and I think like for me, a person who watches a lot of television like this, one of the things that's hard is that at a certain point, like you just kind of know how it's going to go, right? Like, I think we talked about a few episodes ago. I said something like my partner doesn't watch a lot of TV, and so she doesn't know about the fall, right? Like that fall can be surprising to her. And so for me, an avid TV watcher, what is the most fun and the most enjoyable are the shows where I do know what's coming. Like I do know it's predictable, but I am genuinely enjoying the performance, the atmosphere, the writing so much that I am not bothered by the fact that I know what's coming next. It is in fact reassuring. And this show does surprise sometimes, right? There are surprises, there are twists and turns, there are versions of this story that are distinctly different from other Star Treks. There are moments where different kinds of story get to be told, and also like it doesn't put as pretty of a bow on it as a lot of the others do. I think without giving too much of a spoiler, you know, there's a character, there are a number, there is actually more than one. There's a few moments in the show where they acknowledge that like crew members die, and that's something that's sometimes missing from some of the original the older series, but they do it in a way that feels more true than the version where they're just not acknowledging that like the red shirts are dying, you know. So
Tasha Yar's death was kind of a mess.
yeah.
Spoilers for the first season of Next Generation, second season, I can't remember. The thing you were saying about how it can sometimes surprise you reminded me specifically, and you've not seen this one, but I just want to like, if you like that feeling about how like it's hitting all the beats you expect and that's enjoyable, and then occasionally it like flips a switch. Episode 8, which is as of this recording, it's the latest episode of season 2, it's incredible.
Okay.
I don't love maybe some thematic stuff it implies, right? But like the stories it's telling with its characters, I was floored. That was one that Jonathan watched all the way through with me, and he does not care about this kind of show.
Okay.
So
okay.
Less than Megan even. So
yeah.
The last episode I have on our list to talk to folks about is the second episode of season 2, which is Ad Astra Per Aspera, we're in season 2, so there's like a little bit of setup that you need to know to get into this one, which is that Una Chin Riley, number 1, we discover pretty early on in season 1, is from a race of humanoid people called Illyrians that are infamous in this society for genetic manipulation, bioengineering. If you know anything about the original series, and Khan Noonien Singh, who is weirdly relevant to this show as well. Laan, her last name is Noonien Singh, right?
Yes,
she's a descendant. She's a
he's
descendant
an
of Khan.
ancestor.
Khan, his whole thing, right, was altering genetic code of the people that followed him. And that, leading to the eugenics wars, which was like a sort of critical, traumatic, part of the history of Star Trek. So Illyrians are not welcome in Starfleet. And that is an immediate conflict, when Pike finds out. And he does the Pike thing where he's just kind of like, screw the rules. Like, you're the best first officer I've ever had, or the best first officer in Starfleet. Yeah. But the thing is, like, it's very much a setup for her getting found out. Yeah. Episode 2 of season 2 is a trial episode, which, like I said earlier, is a classic Star Trek thing. One of the classic episodes of The Next Generation is Measure of a Man, to determine to what extent Data is a person. Or any of the Q trials, correct? Right? Like, all of this is... Yeah, literally that show begins and ends with a trial, right? And this episode feels so Next Generation to me. Like, just like the setup, the structure, right? The delivery of the arguments. It's very... The question that it's asking. Right. And I mentioned this episode earlier because Pike goes basically, Una is basically kind of given up. She's like, listen, I'm going to go take my lashes and leave Starfleet. And, that's what I deserve. I lied, etc. And he's basically not letting her. And he goes to find an Illyrian lawyer, right? That can help her out in this case. And goes to convince... Sorry, I'm just screaming about the lawyer. I'll have to know what you're screaming about. He goes basically to find her old friend and to bring her onto the case. And like I said, she is the first person to bring this into the context of race in any discussion about like Illyrians. And she's a Black woman. Yeah. And this show is made up of a lot of different kind of people. But like in regards to Illyrians, most of the people we've seen, talk about it are white people up to this point. Yeah. So I just thought it was really stellar. Tell me why you're having so many good feelings about this lawyer. So good. Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, like a moment that I think you could read the show as like a little bit ham-fisted, right? Yeah. In a way that it's like clearly being like a Black woman is going to deliver to you these questions about who belongs in humanity and who does not, and who has been excluded and who has been, lauded for the things that Illyrians are accused of. But you're so right. She's just so good, and the tension and relationship and like acknowledgments between her and Una, number 1, are remarkable. I mean, I think like from start to finish, this is a Star Trek episode, truly to its core, right? And like, I mean that in like the truest sense. Like, this is an episode that could hold its own and punches above its weight in some ways, I think, in terms of the acting. Mm-hmm. Her name is, I'm going to pronounce this without looking it up, but it's Yetide Badaki is her name. Yeah. The actress. Yeah. Yes, the actress, yeah. I don't remember what the lawyer's name is. Neera Katul. Neera is mostly what I remember. But yeah, she is representing Una in this trial. And I think what's really interesting is the episode, and Neera specifically, right, in this episode, the question is not, does Una deserve to be in Starfleet, right? I think everyone, maybe except for the people that are putting her on trial in this episode, kind of agrees that like Una has only done good things. The lie was to get her in a position where she has like basically only delivered good work, right? And she's like ultimately a good person in this, and this lie is like not a big enough lie to keep her away from that. I think that's the position of the episode, but I also think it's like a side point. What I found more interesting was Neera talking about what this case could do for Illyrians, right? Yeah. And what does winning this case make things worse for Illyrians? Does winning this case in certain ways make it worse for Illyrians? Does losing the case make it better? Or does winning in a different way make it better? Could she ultimately lose this case, but make a case for Illyrians, but, leave Una behind, right? Still, maybe advance the Illyrian society's connection to the Federation, right? Make progress in the decades or maybe centuries of hatred and exclusion towards Illyrians, but maybe Una's no longer at Starfleet. That is a real reality that she sets up at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, it is a real reality that, like, people who litigate on civil rights and civil liberties in America consider, right? If we are not going to win, what are we going to say in court? Like, there is just as much a matter of, like, what becomes of the record of the court. And this is why so many people have, like, I'm going to get a little, like, nerdy and wonky in a different way here, right? Like, there's a lot of sense of, like, entering something into the official record and, like, an amicus brief and who can file amicus briefs. And at the Supreme Court, there's, I mean, every court you can refer, not every court. Anyway, friend of the court briefs or amicus briefs, right? Like, these are often filed by people who have a perspective to give to the court, right? And that perspective, what makes it into how the court talks about and thinks about, sometimes comes from amicus briefs, not just from the arguments that are had before the court. And so, like, what becomes a matter of record? If and, like, this is not an example that I love, right? But there is something to be said for, if in a case where the court is talking about transgender people and the rights of transgender people, if at the beginning of the case or the beginning of the trial, the court doesn't have good language to use to talk about transgender people, and through the course of the argument, I mean, I guess this is just the episode. Right. Through the course of the argument, learns better language to talk about transgender people. And while it doesn't find for the person, the court learns something,
right?
Then is that valuable, right? What is the sacrifice that we're willing to make? And I think that, like, I will say to Una's credit, she takes it on the chin, right? She's a little bit upset about it, but she understands her position that she can give, right? If her record, and, like, there's a little bit of, like, it's not without its problems. It certainly is saying, like, if Una can prove that she is the model minority by having her really good Starfleet record, that they are all going to look at and say, wow, you have had a really good record of service. And that proves to us that there are good Illyrians out there, right? Like, that has its own problems, but it is also a question worth asking, because there is an understanding that in the dominant system, some of what we have to do is prove to the dominant system that it needs to change its mind about something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. We see this in talk of, like, good immigrants as well, right? That's, like, it's basically model minority in a different context.
Very much.
I want to say this because I think it's at risk of spoiling some things, but I also think it's worth the conversation. This case ends up hinging on the concept of asylum.
Yeah.
Again, one of those things that's, like, the show being ham-fisted, but I also found to be extremely resonant for me. Yeah. This is a person existing in the world, right?
Yeah.
Watching those moments, right, without necessarily talking about the results, but, like, watching those moments, I was feeling things about the real world in the ways I think some of the best media that I consume, right, makes me think. And, like, was it ham-fisted? Sure. Was it cheesy? Absolutely not, right?
No.
It was, like, it was delivered in such a way that all of the context was there, right?
Yeah.
It's not sort of papered over and really glossy. It's pretty it set itself up to deliver appropriately.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I don't think that is something that I would classify as ham-fisted. I think that it's deliberate, but it's not ham-fisted.
Maybe that's right.
It is intentional. It is trying to call your attention to something in the real world that we experience, right? And that we see. But I think that, like, there are little details about it that make it feel just deliberate rather than, kitschy. I mean, I think that, like, there's this moment too of, like, there are steps in the process that she needed to have followed to ask for asylum. And maybe that wasn't what she was intending to do, but like, I don't know, without going too far into it, I think for, you know, our listeners at home, the thing that you need to know is that it tells a really compelling story, and it is illuminating and thought-provoking and understanding, I think, even without saying what the result is, right? Like, the complicated aspect of asking for asylum and redress, like from a governing authority.
Well, and I thought, as a person who has thought for years on these problems, right?
Sure.
The relationship between one's safety and one's personal relationships with the people at home.
Yeah.
Nira and Una have an existing relationship as children, and Una's decision to be in Starfleet affected that, and this case affects it too, right?
Yeah.
When I say that this show is about characters, right, first, and like plot second, this is an episode I can point to and be like, it's telling me a story about Una and Nira, and also delivering on the rest of it.
Yeah, I really think that too. I hadn't even thought to talk about the way that they position Una and Nira's relationship is, I think, one of the first times in this show that I genuinely felt like a twinge of heartbreak about it. You know, I think there are other moments in season 1 where something sad happens or like there is a loss, and I felt that loss. But this was the one that I was like, oh fuck. Oh, they've got some shit going on, right? And like, I also think that like it is a good, there is an interesting thing happening here of like, many of the larger conceits of Star Trek as a whole, the larger philosophical questions that it asks, have to do with race and racism and belonging, right? And who belongs where and when and in what way, and how do we break down or build up those understandings? And this episode, as we've said, is emblematic of all of the best versions of that conversation.
I mean, this is the job of speculative fiction and science fiction generally, right? Like it exists entirely to ask questions about the real world by providing wild scenarios that don't exist, right? And like Star Trek has always been delivering those conversations, I mean, since the beginning, right? And the reason that the original series, you know, we talked earlier about how like it's kind of dated, right? Especially in regards to anti-Semitism. The reason that it has changed is because the world that it is referencing has changed.
Yeah.
It's not just because times have changed and like we don't write scripts this way anymore. Like yes, it's that. But it's primarily because the job of science fiction is to comment on the real world. And if the base reality, right? We're not talking about simulation theory here, but I'm just using that word. If reality has changed, then the reality being commented on by science fiction has changed.
100%.
And that, just like if your show is narratively cohesive in that way, you're doing science fiction correctly.
Yeah, I think that is so true and such a good point. And so, I mean, like my favorite speculative fiction, all of it does this as best it can, right? Like that is, if you have read the book Infomocracy by Malka Older, that is a speculative fiction piece that takes the world that we exist in now and projects it into the future in a way that I feel is like incisive and delightful. And this show does the exact same thing, right? Projects us. I got the joy of explaining to my partner like what a stardate is and how stardates work and like what it means in terms of like how far into the future they are from us, right? And like she, by the way, doesn't like that. It starts with a 4 because it's the 24th century. She was like, so why wouldn't it be 24? And I'm like, well, because it's counting from the 20th century, which is when humans became adjacent to like warp power. In the 21st century is actually when humans got warp power in the Star Trek universe. Anyway, the point is
it's counting from one particular moment in time.
Yeah. And so, you know, the thinking about like, okay, what does the 24th century look like? This show certainly delivers on a version of the 24th century that I find compelling and interesting. And like, I don't know if exciting is the right word. Like, is it exciting that some of the same problems that exist now continue to exist into the future? No, but is that what the show is trying to say? Or is the show giving us commentary on what is now could always be.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's like saying that this is like one of those like cheesy History Channel like future projection things. Like that's a brand of content you can watch. It's out there. This is science fiction, right? It's commenting on our current world by imagining a future one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other thing is too, right, that there are often things that are prescient even before we knew they were prescient. So, well, remains to be seen whether or not we'll build a warp core engine and take to space in a giant disk.
Yeah, I will say one of my favorite examples, I think of speculative fiction doing this work in the right way is Hank Green's books.
Oh yeah.
Like he's specifically commenting on the near future in regards to celebrity, in regards to alt-right politics and like what that means, right, for the future of communication between one another and like how communication changes and like why it's difficult when communication gets faster. All things he said on the YouTube channel for what it's worth. But I really enjoy his books for that reason because I can see the parallels and like what he thinks the answers might be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I was referencing in terms of prescient media is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, which is like another example of a near future imagining, right, that now takes place in our overlaps in timeline with our current time and feels prescient in many ways. So anyway, so those are some other media recommendations that you should watch.
You should watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds on Paramount Plus. We're in the middle of season 2 right now. I actually don't know how many episodes there are this season. Maybe it's just 10 again. I'm not sure.
I think it's just 10 again.
There's been some crazy good stuff that even AC has not seen.
I haven't seen it yet, and I'm so excited to go watch.
We've got more Spock fun times. We've got a really harrowing military history one. We've got a crossover with Star Trek's The Lower Decks, which was such a fun time.
Yeah.
And the characters that show up from that show in this one, if you don't know, that's an animated TV show, and the actors who play them, the voice actors, are actually in the real, like in the show. It's is it Jack Quaid? Is that his name? And Tawny Newsome.
Nice.
And that episode's super fun. And I'd never seen The Lower Decks, and I had a good time. So
delightful.
I'm trying to get y'all to watch this.
Yeah. Matt, I think to close us, you should just insert here the clip of Captain Pike from the end of episode 7 where he says, "Arg, mateys."
I can do that.
Arg, me mateys. If we ever catch Angel, we should make them walk the plank. Arg.
Please stop.
Please stop.
I will.
The immediate follow up of Una saying, "Please stop." Please.
I will definitely be inserting clips all over this episode. If I don't have "oh, this is fun" in this episode, I fucked up.
Oh, this is fun.
Hey.
Wait, hang on. Wait. When Angel is standing in not in Spock's quarters, but they're in the room with Spock, and it's just them and Spock, and they're standing behind Spock in that full body, like cat suit, mesh panel cat suit, and it's just they're just standing there, and you're like, that's not the bad guy. Sorry, they're standing there like that, and that's not the bad guy. I'm supposed to believe that that's not the bad. Like Spock isn't looking at them and being like, that's the bad guy, right? Like that's like the little pea brain inside Spock's head said, they're hot. I forgot everything that I know about the world until I picked up on one context clue.
Also, that they're doing stuff in that episode with like cinematography to like not feature them as much, you know? Like they're like trying to be like, oh, this person's not, on one of the thirds or the center of the screen, so they are not important. And then of course they are. Of course they're the bad guy.
Of course they are.
Anyway, I think that is the show. I think that's the season.
That's the show. Wow, Matt, we did it.
Did it. We will be back October, November-ish.
We'll be back soon.
Early November, I think, is probably the right answer.
For you, it'll be like a month from now.
Yeah, that's the other thing I want to fix, is that right now we are around 2 months, not behind, but like we record and then the episode comes out around 2 months later. that is great in terms of like scheduling episodes. What it's not great for is that, for example, we talked about Hank Green's cancer diagnosis in the episode that releases on Tuesday, and he has finished his treatment and is like talking about how there's no cancer in his body anymore.
He's in remission.
Yeah. So it's not that we need to be super timely. It's not really like a timely show,
Right.
but like I would like to be at least somewhat relevant, you know?
Yes. It doesn't. We are both people who think thinky thoughts about media and also who think thinky thoughts about current events.
Mhm.
And we want to make sure that we're getting things to you in a timeline that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll probably be a little bit quicker and a little bit more relevant in those instances. But in the meantime, where can people find you on the internet?
That's me being faster. People can find me on the internet in so many places. Matt, you can find me somehow at the end of all of this. You know what? Maybe not by the time that this episode airs, so I shouldn't say you can still find me on the platform that shall not be named.
Because I don't know what to call it.
You can find me on Blue Sky, acfaci.bsky.app. Is that right?
I have no
Did I
idea.
remember? Nope.
It's
I got it
.social?
wrong this time. It is .social. At acfaci.bsky.social. You can find me on Instagram at ac_faci. And you can just generally find me haunting you in the corners of the internet. I'm there.
They're there.
Somewhere.
Watch out. You can find me at matthorton.live. I got Threads there. I got Blue Sky there. I got Mastodon there. To be totally honest, I've been mostly using Threads. I've been posting everywhere, but like Threads is where I've kind of landed for now. We'll see how long that lasts.
And hey, you can follow the podcast.
You can follow the
on
podcast
Threads.
there. We've got an account both on Instagram and on Threads. It's at can'tletitgo.gay. The dot is the dot. It's not like DOT. It's the dot. And figuring out what goes there is going to be part of the things that we figure out in the next couple months or so.
Yeah. And hey, if there are things that you want to hear us talk about, we'd love to hear about it.
Actually, I just want to like publicly say this. If we know you and we're friends and there's something you want to talk about on the show, get in our DMs.
Yeah. Come talk to us on the show about stuff. We want to talk to you.
At this point, you've probably heard the episode of around Disney parks that our friend Mitch did with us. So you know what that can look like.
And it can look like anything you want it to look like. It could look like something completely different. I will also say, Matt, I got thoroughly roasted by a friend of the podcast, Elizabeth, for using our premise of this little show as a conversation starter at a party. And I really have to say that if you live like me in a very career core place, I live in Washington, D.C., everybody here asks you, what do you do? And that's a boring question to ask a new person. So I would recommend asking them the next time you don't know what to say, what's something you can't stop thinking about, and seeing what kind of answer you get.
That's amazing. I appreciate that Elizabeth roasted you for that.
I'm a podcast bro now, so I'm incorrigible.
All right, folks. Well, we will talk to you in November.
See you on the flip side.